Good evening, everybody. I'm your host, Ashton, and I've had a lot on my mind the past couple days. Ink Dot, what's going on, boss? Maddie, what's going on, boss? Okay. Like I said, I've had a lot on my mind the past couple days. So, I would hate to jump into one place and then want to go right into another. Ink Dot says he's geeking at work. Very nice. Gotta stick it to the man. You guys tell me what's going on. What's been on your guys' minds? I'll give it a couple of minutes and give someone the opportunity. What's going on? Okay. Well, like I said, I have a lot on my mind and I've been thinking about what I want to espouse this week. I just saw a really great reel talking about the nature of economic development, which of course caught my attention because I like talking about that stuff. I think that's very important for us to contemplate, to chew on, is what exactly we mean by economic development. For us, it's relevant because the economy is the sum of our choices as consumers, because I don't own any factories. I'm not a capitalist in that sense. And Ink Dot said he's at work, so maybe he's producing his surplus value for his capitalists, right? So the economy being the sum of our choices has a lot to do with the perception of our desires, the ability of our desire to transform our conditions that we exist within. And what I mean by that is this: we don't desire things that we don't have access to, or that we don't have knowledge of. We only desire things that we have ideas of, because that's what creates the craving, is actually the fact that it is away from us, if that makes sense. For example, I don't crave a meal that has not been invented yet. I don't crave something with an ingredient that hasn't been discovered yet. So I can't make an economic decision that has to do with that product or that commodity yet. I'm trapped in a time-space circumstance that limits my desire. So my desire as a will, of course, that's pretty intuitive for us as 21st century people. We can say, well, my will is to become a singer, or become an artist, or become something, anything, whatever we put our minds to, whatever we want to create, whatever career we imagine ourselves as being suited towards. So if the economy is the sum of our choices, and our daily choices too, and it has a relationship to space and to time, then that is to say that we can accurately chart with pretty good certainty the nature of economy as energy and surplus change. So by energy and surplus, what I'm talking about is abundance. The abundance of commodities that we have access to is directly correspondent to the access to energy that we have available. I can only desire something that can be shipped from China in the 21st century. I can order it on Amazon. It can be shipped directly to my house in a matter of days. It comes from China to the Amazon distribution center. It goes from the distribution center to my house. Okay? So that's only possible with an extreme amount of energy. I mean, it's pretty intuitive for us to understand, because I would imagine like nobody here is the manager of an Amazon warehouse. But we all have a pretty good idea despite that. And that's because it has a direct correspondence to our condition. That's our culture, as we can understand it. So likewise, because it's here, because we have access to that economic condition here, those circumstances have been developed, we can chart a before and an after. Okay? I'm very interested in the before. The before looks like the past. So, what do they say? That Germany invented the highway in the 1930s. And that itself was the marvel of their time. They said, wow, I can ship something from Berlin to Munich in a couple days instead of a week, right? That was like the big globalizing event for them in the 1930s. That was only about 100 years ago. So how is it that we can economically transform, we can economically develop, the fact that we have that choice to engage with, to go from a couple days across, like a few hundred miles, to then have something be shipped from China to the distribution center to my house in less than a week? That's only possible with an abundance of energy, with an abundance of resource. That's the before. That's the before circumstance. That's what led us here. So think of it like this. All of the accumulation, right? When energy has the opportunity to accumulate, there has to be something to hold it. Otherwise, it's like water through a sieve and it all just like flows out and it's free and it can go anywhere it wants. That's wasted energy. That's not efficient. So it's quickly corrected to be held with the maximum amount of capacity. When energy is held between generations, if you follow that metaphor, each generation is being passed a circumstance for storing its accumulated energy. And it has grown and grown and grown and grown because of a very specific set of circumstances that have only taken place over the past, we'll say at the most broad time span, 20,000 years. That's it. Whatever happened 20,000 years ago was the start of the passing of that bowl. Okay, that's what, if you ask like anthropologists and archaeologists, that's when they say that civilization started. This conception that we as 21st century people have of a civilization started about 20,000 years ago. So one of the big monumental shifts then is the transition from settled architecture that we can use to define civilization, like the sites like Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia. Then we can chart about 10,000 years later, around 11,000 years ago, we have the ability then to accumulate agriculture. Because no longer are the plants, the grasses being starved of their CO2. Suddenly, because of the temperature shift, they're allowed to become full. They're allowed to blossom into these really hefty fruits. And once we have those fruits, that's when you get settled architecture, agriculture, the blossoming of the Fertile Crescent into civilization all across the world. That's what they say, is that all of the sites from the Americas to the Middle East to China, all the very suddenly had access to agriculture around the same time. Now, somebody who is pathological in my eyes would look at that and say, oh, there's very obviously a global civilization at that time, and they were able to teach everybody about agriculture. But of course, as soon as you put any thought into that, you realize how ridiculous it is, because where would that first civilization have learned agriculture from? No, these are real humans, real articulate, authentic, smart, intelligent humans who had access to specific resources at a very specific time. By then, we had already migrated across the world. We had already migrated and integrated ourselves into the ecosystems to become a keystone species. Likewise, at that point in time, once we had settled, then the temperature shifted, then we had access to all of those grains, okay? And grains are what builds civilization. That was only 11,000 years ago. Because I'm talking, the scale at which I wish to discuss spans hundreds of thousands of years. Okay, if we don't at least have that on our back burner, I think we're losing a lot of opportunity for observation. If we can't expand our horizons to hundreds of thousands of years, I think we're lacking. I think it's like having one hand tied behind our back. Whenever we make economic decisions, whenever we decide to allocate our time and our energy and our labor towards a particular endeavor. So it's extremely important, only now, only in this present moment that we have access to this 21st century, that we have access to these types of records. Now we have the technology. I can excuse Hegel for not having that thought because he lived in the 1800s when they didn't have access to these historical insights or these tools or anything they could use to measure. You know, they had absolutely no clue about the state of the world, let alone, 300 years ago. 300 years from the 1800s was the 1500s. Those were the medieval times. We were archaic peoples. So I can forgive Hegel, right? But I cannot forgive us now. Now we know. Likewise, putting that type of a time span, the timetable, right? I'm not saying that we have to account for it specifically, to do the math to account for it specifically. I'm saying we need to just open up our tunnel vision to at least account for it. We cannot be so narrow-minded. We're talking 5-year plans. 5-year plan, guys? No, bro, I want us to expand our view, to incorporate not only 100,000 years ago, but 100,000 years from now. My argument is this: the people who can open up their tunnel vision to see not only 100 years ago then, but 100 years ago from now, are the people who are given the leg up. They have the leg to stand on that gives us the opportunity to transition into the next epoch, into the next period of time that's discernible and distinguishable from this one. Okay? So we'll start with that as a foundation, okay? Now, a 5-year plan sounds ridiculous if we're accounting for 100,000 years from now. I made it sound ridiculous. But I don't think that it necessarily has to stay ridiculous. I think the 5-year plan is close enough to us, to you and I, because I'm talking to you guys who are viewing this, right? I'm assuming you guys are my contemporary. So likewise, because we have the ability to account for these things now, because we have the ability to calculate and to observe and to actually understand what we are looking at, okay? As much as empiricism can justify, right? Because all of this is on the foundation of empiricism, which is really only your left hand, and we still have a right hand that we have access to, okay? This right hand is our present moment. That's what I want to say. We can keep our left hand out and open to measure the many ages and the epochs and stuff like that, right? But let's keep our right hand close to our chest. And what we can do then is using this knowledge that we're accruing, using this knowledge that we now have access to, we can hold close to us and say, well, as I transition, as an individual transition across my own lifespan, as I graduate from a young man into a mature man, into an old man, and then I will die, what are the phases that I will exhibit within myself that will grant me access to integration with that left hand, with those epochs? Because this is another thing that I'll say, is that the lifespan of one person is very comparable to the lifespan of an epoch. It's just geometry. Same thing with the smallest ant, same thing with the smallest speck of dust. Okay, think of the smallest thing we can, a mustard seed, right? What does it do? It exhibits the exact same behavior. As above, so below. We can use that to summarize the whole principle. Likewise, if the lifetime of an individual is comparable at all to any period of time, the culture that bubbles out of that, the culture that emanates from that, as we carry the torch from the past generation and then pass it along to the next, that's what, let's see if I can remember his name. Hermeneutics. Who was the guy who made up hermeneutics? I can't remember. But I remember his point being that each generation has the responsibility for itself to inherit the culture of times gone past, to reinvigorate it with those present conditions that they have, those present passions that they have. Because that's all we can boil this down to. I don't have to calculate my passion. I don't have to prove my passion. I only have to exhibit and to feel and to live through my passion. That goes for me, that goes for you. Okay? If we can do that, then we can summarize the lifetime of an epoch. We can summarize the lifetime of a decade. We can summarize the lifetime of an entire species, of a lineage of families that goes back 10,000 years. Okay. Goddard. Was his name Goddard, who created hermeneutics? He was a German cultural scientist or something like that. I'm going to make a fool of myself when I talk about that. But I do remember that being a particular point of his advocacy, was the idea that the life of an individual is summarized in the life of an epoch. Okay, so yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Well, yeah, okay. We have access to the tools that we have to measure the past, and we can gain that evidence from the past to inform our present. That has not always been the case, and that was fine for those times. However, now that we have access to that information, we can now make informed decisions about the future. However, our informed decisions will be shown through passion rather than intellect. So let me transition then into this. When we talk about movements that are like culturally revolutionary, when we talk about socialist utopianism or, the capitalist industrial revolution about 200 or 300 years ago, there's a tendency in reductionist materialism to grant humans the credit for those events, right? So, for instance, let me phrase it like this. We get taught in school that humans created the Industrial Revolution that then went from England down to Germany, through, down to Italy, spread to America. Now we have factories in America. And now we can build the cities that we have today because of the Industrial Revolution, then the Information Revolution. Those phases, we cut them up into phases, okay? What I want to argue, though, is this, is that there is a unity of free will and predeterminism. The unity of free will and predeterminism is thoughtless action. That's all it is. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. We can use as an umbrella term for all of human history, all of material history, we can argue effectively that if we assume that there is a non-action imperative at the base, everything above it will be determined by that non-action, and that if that's the case, then through non-action, all of these things were still done. So the intellecty must be subservient to the non-action. That's a big umbrella statement that I would be confident in making. Because it goes like this. If we take full credit for the agricultural revolution 11,000 years ago, and we take full credit for the industrial revolution 200 years ago, and we take full credit for the information revolution just 100 years ago, at what point do we cease to engage with our environment? If it is fully conscious, and I'm saying that it's not, if these are fully conscious efforts, then there would be absolutely no environmental influence over the agricultural revolution, over the industrial revolution, over the information revolution, and over the coming cultural revolution. We know now that that is not the case. We now have the information and the proof and the empirical evidence to tell us that these are environmental actions, that these are environmental convalescence, congealments between us and our environment, meeting each other with where we're at. For example, it goes like this. I'll use the agricultural revolution as a metaphor, or as an example, rather. 11,000 years ago, the Ice Age recedes. The Ice Age begins to recede. And carbon dioxide skyrockets. Carbon dioxide is the means by which plants themselves are able to grow. That's their oxygen, right? And then they process that carbon dioxide into oxygen for us to breathe. So essentially, the plants now have access to a whole new energy resource. Now, what does that sound a little bit like, okay? Think about it like that. What does that remind you of? Is there anything that reminds you of? being deprived of something for a long period of time, suddenly having access to a lot of energy very quickly. Okay, does this remind us of anything, guys? Okay, so think about it like this. Suddenly plants, a very few select types of plants, now have access to this abundance of resource, abundance of energy. So we go from these stringy, dry grains to now these full kernels of wheat and maize and rice. Okay? What comes after? What happens afterwards? Civilizations independent of each other begin to blossom across the globe. The Americas, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, China, all over the world. Indiscriminatory. All of the places that have access to these grasses. Okay? That's a driving factor. I'm not saying that's the driving factor behind civilization, because that's already been 20,000 years in the making. That's part of human intellect. Okay? That's part of human conscious effort. But every single stage, every single impact has to do with the congealment between the environment and the human. And if that's the case, and I'm saying that it is the case, that means that there's a non-thinking other, a non-human other. We can say it's intelligent. What I mean by thinking is that it's not thinking like a human thinks, okay? It's not making human rational decision. It doesn't have access to human Freiheit, like the German rational freedom, okay? The freedom to choose. That's a particularly human phenomenon, is what I'm trying to communicate. So if there is that Freiheit, and there is the non-Freiheit, the freedom to be a rational agent, that means that it doesn't necessarily only have to be rational to work. So it's kind of like a Pandora's box, okay? Human history, right? As soon as we open that lens, it's like putting that pair of glasses on. Like whatever that movie is where the guy puts the glasses on and he can see the truth, and like they're the aliens and like all the advertising and stuff. You put that pair of glasses on and you realize that life is made as a compromise between your freedom and the environment's allowance. You are opening gates that you can walk through, but those gates are a lot heavier than you. They have to have well-oiled hinges in order to open. Let that metaphor sit, okay? Okay. So we've talked about the before, okay? We've talked about the past. The past, we had the agricultural revolution, then we had the industrial revolution, then we had the information revolution. Keep in mind, all of these points still stand. We established a base of our pyramid, okay? That non-action, the unity of free will and and predestination, so to speak. Because they were never separate to begin with, right? That makes sense. Imagine a world where that's the case. That's the entrance. That's the beginning. Those are the gates that open into the world of the non-dual, okay? Into the world of non-attachment, into the world of non-action. These are the core tenets that we can now understand. Now that we have access to them, that means that you and I really do mean the people that I'm talking to right now who are genuinely hearing this, we have the unique opportunity to empirically understand that non-attachment, non-action, and the third one that I said, become imperatives to us, become necessary for us to take the torch that's being passed to us, to reinvigorate that torch with our passion to exist, our will to life, and then to pass on the torch in another way, onto the next generation afterwards, okay? All of the art that can be made, all of the art that, the music, the means by which, the medium, that's what I'm trying to say, the medium by which art is conveyed in this particular epoch has such a distinct flavor, has such a distinct profile in relationship to all of the other periods of time. That is what we're beginning to see at the dawn of this next epoch, okay? And so it becomes particularly relevant to us when we engage with those, with that non-dualism, with that non-action, with that non-attachment. Okay, there's the three. Remember those because I'm going to forget. When we hearken unto those three great treasures, we engage. Imagine, okay, we'll just say, Imagine, if you will, somebody who has those three treasures in their hand, or like pearls on a necklace or whatever, like, you know, or beads on a wristband. They hold those very sacred and very thoroughly. Imagine this hypothetical person that adheres to non-attachment, non-dualism, and non-action. Imagine what they would do if they went out into the world, if they were in a cave and then they left and they came into, like, I don't know, Dayton, Ohio, if they came into like Albuquerque, New Mexico, if they went to Portland, Oregon. What would they see? What would they act? What would they act in favor of? What kind of economic decisions would they make? Right, consider it. I mean, would they go out and, you know, would they have to become a beggar? Would they get corralled by the police? Would they get hustled by a gangster, something like that? I mean, really consider what type of a person it takes to exist in the conditions that we live in, is really the points that I'm trying to make. Okay? Because when we imagine this hypothetical person and we imagine ourselves as this hypothetical person, what we find, though, is that it changes, it at least puts those glasses on that I was saying. It puts that tint over our lens that grants us a particular insight into the nature of why we make the decisions that we make. Okay? And that those decisions that we make have exactly to do with that same metaphor I was saying, where our environment is meeting us. We now have the unique opportunity to watch as our culture shifts, as it grows into something new, as it becomes something very strange, right? So that we've gone from the past into the present, and then into the future. Okay? So imagining the future, the very, very distant future, like I established at the very beginning, we would say, let's put the next 100,000 years on the back burner. Okay, now we have access to information that tells us about our lives 300,000 years ago. Let's put the 300,000 years from now on the back burner. Let's keep it on our horizon. This hypothetical person with these three great virtues now has this information on their horizon. Excuse me, what are they going to do? What is their life going to look like in 200 years, in 500 years, in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years? Okay. I mean, just contemplate it. Are we really going to build skyscrapers forever? Are we really going to try to go to space and conquer the stars forever? I would say no. I would say no. All right, so let's take a pause for a second. I want to read through these comments that we're getting. Okay. Madison says Wu-Wei. That's absolutely true. Melon Redux. What's going on, brother? You say Glorbus. Okay. Requiem of Ashim says thoughts on prosocial psychopathy. That's out of my wheelhouse. You'd have to ask like a psychoanalyst guy. I don't know. Melon Redux says that non-dualist Glorbus tint. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well. Requiem says the non-dualist post-truth principle life entails changing beliefs like clothes to suit your situation the best. I only argue no because if you mesh the free will and predeterminism that we establish as an axiom of non-action, then that's not necessarily contingent for change. Okay? Unless your environment allows you to do that, then you will, but if not, then you won't. Okay? But I will say though, if you're saying something like, changing with the like being wishy-washy, like going on with whatever is like best suitable for the time, that is a contingency of predeterminism. Because what I argue is that because there's an environmental nature of predeterminism at play, I'm not saying it's the whole deal, I'm saying it's at play, it's a principle that's at play. Because of that, we can imagine them, because I think they literally will, we will find that they literally function like engines in the sky. This is what we're going to find. the whole trail that you can find onto cybernetics, all of that stuff is going to point you in this direction, that we have these engines in the sky that are literally like these zeitgeists, these big, great ghosts, these powerful angels that pull strings and make life happen. I mean, think of the whole Greek myth. They say that the gods would come down from heaven and they would, put their stakes in for who they want to win what war. They're not making a random thing up, okay? I'm not saying that particularly makes sense to us today. It's a very antiquated metaphor, but I think that there is some truth in to say that there are aspects that are through us and post us that influence us, okay? So what I would say is that if you find that your opinion changes drastically for some reason, that there's a ghost that's pulling your strings, okay? Exactly. Think of all the people who say you're possessed by the devil, right? Is there literally a devil? I don't know. I'm not going to say. Maybe you guys have an opinion on that. But what I won't prove right now, but what I have pointed out in the past, is that there is reason to find conviction in the fact that there are these ghosts, like a zeitgeist, like a geist as a consciousness, as a will, these forces of wills that exist for particular ends. That we can wrap up, if, for example, it's like this, if two people are craving the same thing at the same time, I can take those cravings out of their heads, figuratively, hold them together as one. I can say this is the craving desire form. I can find that, and then I can say this form has a will that it is enacting, despite the fact that it's physically separated. Okay, does that make sense? It's like drawing just a bigger circle around them, right? And saying that there is a force at play. I can define that force. And moreover, that those forces do have wills to accomplish ends. In fact, if we're talking about desire, that has absolutely everything to do with our economic circumstance, like I was talking about at the very beginning. The fact that we make the choices that we make means that there are very powerful ghosts at play who have ends to meet and who have goals that they want to accomplish. For example, it's like this. If you look at the Taoist pantheon in antiquated China, what you'll find is that they arrange their heaven as a business, or as a kingdom that has bureaucrats and managers. They have quotas, they have ends to meet, they have all these things. They require a certain amount of sacrifices for particular goals. That's not surprising to me. I can see that and say, well, of course that makes sense. Like, that's just how it is. That's the realm of the form. That's the realm of the form as it has a relationship to a will, right? We can, I think for the sake of conversation, we can wrap that up and put a bow on it. So Requiem says, very true, the source and I are one, but the source is greater than myself. Yeah, if you want it to be, yeah, sure. Melon Redux asks, so if two people want the same thing, that's a ghost. To me, yes. That's a particular idiosyncrasy that I have. Like, if you were going to say that to somebody else, they might not agree. But if you're asking me, I say yes. Because I can find, like, okay. Like, if I'm hanging out with my friends and we're having a lot of beer, I look to them and I say, man, Taco Bell sounds really good. And they're like, oh, dude, oh my God, it does. How did you know that, man? Like, dude, it sounds so good to me too. In that moment, I would think, whoa, there's a ghost at play. There's a synchronicity at play, okay? Because nothing's coincidental. Remember, nothing's arbitrary. Not everything is free and rational agents, right? There's an environmental play. Okay, now we can dissect that into teeny tiny bits, like an empiricist would want to do. They would say, like, well, we have information now that tells us that our gut biome talks to our brain about what we want to eat and what we want to, engage with for stimuli. That's very true. That doesn't take away from that. What I'm doing is a metaphysical exercise. And metaphysics does not take away from the physical. We can have both. That's what I'm saying, is that there's an enmeshment at play, where I can say my gut biome and your gut biome are probably similar because we're friends and we're hanging out and we drink the same type of beer. And we also like to go to Taco Bell sometimes. Okay? I can say that justifiably and also say that means, in fact, that reinforces the fact that there are ghosts at play, because I can take that desire, it's the nature of the desire, it's the form of the desire at play, from the two of us, have them together, drawing a wider circle, like I say, okay? And call that circle the ghost of this particular desire. Now take that idea and expand it across an entire generation. What does our whole generation have in common, and only us have in common? That's the type of rigorous exercise that I want to implement. That I want to say, like, what are these characteristics that we have that we can wrap up and draw a wide circle around to say this is the zeitgeist. This is the ghost of our time, our distinct flavor. Okay. Okay. Melon asks if there's a psychic component. Sure. I mean, if psychic is the realm of the mind, then absolutely. Social engineering haunting is what Madison says. Yeah, right. It's ghosts who have an interest to play. Well, first of all, we can say it's people that have an interest to play, right? Because it's very convenient for Taco Bell that my friend and I both have a craving at the same time. Okay, but again, let's not give humans all the credit. Never give humans all the credit, okay? They have credit, right? We can hold that in one hand, but also acknowledge in another hand that there are more powerful beings at play. More subtle beings at play, because we can't see them. And actually, power comes in subtlety, right? That's something that you'll find as a common thread, right? So it's kind of like this. When I'm inspired to make a piece of art, and I see it in my head, in my mind's eye, I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly what I want it to look like. I know exactly how to paint it. I know right where the materials are. Did I do that? Did I create the idea? Sure, I had the idea. And the idea wasn't empirically given to me, because it happened in my head or in my body on maybe my spinal cord or something like that. But it's not purely me. It's not purely my incentive. It was given to me. Likewise, okay? That's a metaphor that I use a lot. I say that we make a lot of art, but we never know what it means. We can give meaning to it. In fact, we can have a very full conviction of what this piece means. For example, like when I write icons, I know exactly what each component represents. I know exactly what I'm trying to communicate. But the fact is, non-attachment, non-dualism, non-action are the three. I don't think I repeated any. Dualism, attachment, and action, right? When I'm making a piece of art like that, I think I know, but that only has to do with sense perception. And of course, we cannot trust our sense perception. We should engage in the world as if we can trust our sense perception, because that's what keeps us grounded and sane. But fundamentally, we have to know that engaging in life like it is a dream, because ontologically, a dream and this life are identical. You cannot draw a line between the two. Because of that fact, I can only engage with this life in a sincere way rather than a serious way. That's what Alan Watts says. He says engage in this life like as if it were a game, right? That you never take anything too seriously, but rather you're very sincere in your actions. So likewise, as an artist, because I do a lot of art, I cannot take full credit for that art, because there are more subtle ghosts at play, right? So like I was saying, every decision we make, every idea we have, every choice that we feel a conviction to make are very subtly not our own. We can navigate life with that knowledge and not go crazy. We can navigate life as if it was a game. In the back of our heads, we say, this is all very silly, this is all very fun. We can smile outwardly and say, hi, and how are you? It's nice to meet you. Even though in the back of our minds, we know that we are all the same fundamental process at play. The same geometry, the same dream, the same matter, the same architecture, the same, all of that. So, it's kind of like ungrasping a fist, right? not taking life so seriously, allowing the economy to play itself out. Because again, I can tie that back to what I was saying earlier about when we meet nature. Okay, that's when economy happens. Because the economy is the management of resources. The decisions that we make, the sum of the decisions that we make is equal to our capacity in an economy. And of course, the economy is the management of resources that we extract from nature. Okay, right? So establishing those principles, we can then engage with life. We can engage with those principles with that perspective and say, this is also silly, this is also unserious, yet I will do it to its fullest capacity. Those types of decisions, those types of actions only become possible at very particular moments. Again, it's like I said, I can approach the gate, I can open it with the handle, right? But it has to be well oiled in order for that door to open. That all of change requires metaphysical gates to be open. I can't drive until I have a car, right? That's just contingent. I hope that's not controversial. So likewise, my car is kind of behind a gate, right? I have to open that gate. I have to put my keys into my car to turn the engine over to go somewhere, right? So think of that like a gate, and history and the future are all just gates that we're all opening all the time to change and to distribute and to move stuff around and to become efficient and to express that passion that I was saying at the beginning. Okay, that's all we can do. That's an imperative that I can follow and you can follow. We can all follow that imperative and life will be perfect. That if we engage with life with extreme passion, with as much passion as each situation calls for, if I'm sleeping, then I am sleeping to the fullest of my capacity. If I'm being lazy, then I'm being lazy to the fullest of my capacity. If I'm folding laundry, I'm folding laundry to the fullest of my capacity. If I'm making art, same thing. If I'm doing, I don't know, anything. If I'm eating Taco Bell, okay. Excuse me. It gets warm. But I digress. Right, so ultimately, fundamentally, all we can do is this is a good metaphor. I was listening to Michael Segru's lecture on Schopenhauer today, and he said that Schopenhauer was trying to express life as will and representation like a man riding a horse that he has no saddle for. And I just had the thought that is exactly like in Minecraft. Okay, you guys probably understand this. In Minecraft, you can't ride a horse until you tame it. You know what I mean? Like send hearts if you understand that reference, okay? So you're riding a horse that you haven't tamed yet. And so you're sitting there, you're a free rational agent, but you're also on top of this thing that is taking you wherever it wants to go. Okay? So there's the ego at play, there's the conscious Freiheit, free rational agent at play. But it has to meet the environment with where it's at, okay? All right. So, yeah, we're right. Because that's kind of our constitution, we'll let that be the next step of our pyramid that we're making. So we've got non-dualism, non-attachment, dualism, attachment, and action. Okay, at the bottom of our pyramid, then we have at the next step this idea of the relationship between the ego and the other, right? Okay. So when we do that, the economic decisions that we find ourselves making, this is the art of meditation for those of you who will be familiar. It's the art of sitting with yourself and watching what happens. Okay? We don't have to do Zazen where we're sitting and trying to make ourselves focus and be like, and then we get bored of it and then we go and do a live stream instead. We can simply watch and observe what we're doing at the supermarket. We can watch and observe what we're doing as we're making coffee. We can sit with ourselves quietly as we're working. This is what I love to do at work, is that I find myself, toiling like I'm breaking up soil or something like that. And I have the opportunity to just find myself. I'm not even consciously doing it. Okay? Just to watch it happen. Just watch it happen. Okay? Now, I can do that for 10,000 years and watch as a lot of shit changes. Okay, because as I was saying, the agricultural revolution was only 11,000 years old. So we went from wearing like saber-toothed tiger pelts on our bodies and carrying little children through like, the tundra, the forest to hide in a cave. 10,000 years later, I'm sitting here talking to you guys on a miraculous little scrying stone using energetic whatever. That tells me two things. It tells me that it's okay to sit and watch stuff happen. It's okay to trust the process. And that a lot of stuff can change without much changing. Okay? That all of this stuff seems really cool. Like all of these books, like, wow, it's the sum of human knowledge. It's like books are super important, man. Like we live in the best stage of human existence ever. It's like, that's very brave of you to say. And I don't necessarily agree. I think it's empty. All of these things are empty. The phone is empty. The Instagram profile is empty. This lamp is empty. The cups on my counter are empty. Literally. But also literally, like all this is also literally empty. Insofar as it can become whatever we want, we ascribe a lot of attachment to it because the attachment is the nature for us to say, I like this phone a lot. This is where my friends live. So it's a really good thing. That's an attachment that this ego is prescribing. But yet I'm riding on a horse that's taking me somewhere where there might not be any phones. Or I'm going to have to get a new phone soon. And that's a lot of distress for my ego, but I have to watch it happen. I have to let myself contemplate it as it happens. Okay. Let's take a pause. Okay, Dean joined. What's up, brother? I saw you in Gabe's group chat. I think Alan Watts described what you were talking about as like the greater self tricking itself into thinking we're individuals and almost playing parts. Yeah, that's exactly it. Playing parts in a play. That's exactly it, because life is a theater. Yes, that's right. Requiem says we may be approaching the limits of language here, and it's beautiful. Yes. So okay, that's a great opportunity for me to transition into something more practical, because that is a lot of high-mindedness, and I want to make sure that we actually touch on like the economic stuff, right? Because that's a bad habit I have, is trying to, bring the two together. So, okay. I mentioned this in my last live stream. So, okay, for the new people here, I have the, let's see if I can find it really quickly. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. That's okay. I have a paper that I wrote that I was pretty proud of, and it happened to culminate a lot of the ghost of what I was saying. The gist, which is a niche detail that I'll share with you guys. So the German Geist and the English gist share an etymological root. They come from the same thing. So if I talk about, you get the gist of it, you get the ghost of it. Oh, you get the form of it, bro. Oh, shit, bro. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. It had the gist of it. Okay, this paper that I'm particularly proud of. Because, right, like I was saying earlier, like I'm not going to pretend to be too attached to it, because like I said, it's ghosts. It's ghosts that are creating art, okay? I can't take too much credit for it. So anyway. This paper that I wrote is pretty interesting because it talks about an alternative economic lens or method of analysis. Okay, because my thing is ecological conservation, regenerative agriculture, like what are some other buzzwords that cultivate the gist, right? Like I have to poke at your ghosts in order to make it make sense. So, the alternative that it posits is basically this: that rather than drawing 2 points on a graph and saying, well, we were very desolate as a population and now we're very abundant as a population, we'll draw a line and say, oh, well, we're going to be even more prosperous in the future. What I was hinting at earlier, what I was trying to get to inspire a teeny tiny bit earlier, when I was talking about that the stage of of an epoch is similar to the stage of the human life, where there's a period when it's a baby, then it's a young adult, then it's a man, an old man, and then it dies. Okay, what I was hinting at there, as above, so below, that the same is true for economic policy. That's the same jargon I've been saying this entire time, is that all of this comes back to the distribution of resources and the resources that we have access to. It's so incredibly easy to merge these high-minded religious ideas and these like very earthly practical economic ideas. They are so incredibly related. Okay, especially for us now. Now, because they're related for us now, okay, again, I can take a look and say, why is this so necessary? Why are these ghosts pulling these strings in the way that they are? So, if economic development is akin to a human life cycle, the baby turns into the toddler, turns into the, boy, the young man, right? So that's a lot of upward progress from the human Freiheit perspective, from the conscious perspective, because that's when we gain consciousness. That's when we begin to enact our will into the world, right? But that doesn't last forever. What happens is that the man becomes mature, he mellows out, he becomes humble, and then it's not that his consciousness declines per se. In fact, he becomes wiser as he gets older, but rather the means of accumulation significantly decrease. Okay, and if anybody's here who has seen many, many, many of my live streams, you will know exactly where I'm going with this. Okay? As a man gets older, as a woman gets older, she will find that her resources become more and more immediate to her. She doesn't want to go and conquer a region of France. I'm thinking of like a monarchy in medieval Europe. Okay? An old ass man is not going to be thinking to himself, I need to go out and drive and apply for, I don't know, like what's an ambitious project? What's an ambitious idea? What do young people want to do? They want to go out, they want to like start a business, okay? An 80-year-old man doesn't want to start his own business most of the time. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? Likewise, we can assume that there will be a point in time. I'm not saying it'll be 20 years from now. I'm not saying it'll be 200 years from now. Again, let's keep 100,000 years on our radar. Okay? Let's just meditate and think about the possibilities that can exist 100,000 years from now. This is what I think will happen. As we progress as a species, as we have these economic ebbs and flows, as we have these environmental ebbs and flows, it's very funny that suddenly climate change becomes a very big talking point for us, when in fact climate change has been the defining feature of our species for the past 300,000 years. More relevantly, the past 20,000 years. That's all it's been. So it's like 100,000 years from now. All of the climate changes that'll come and go. All of the periods of dryness and hotness, and then wetness and humidity, and then, we have so much prosperity, now we have absolutely nothing and we're starving. Think about those processes, right? That if we're at this stage where we have this incredible Freiheit, I mean, what is the goal of the last globalized zeitgeist? They want to create consciousness. Hegel's Geist is the idea that the ghost wants to accumulate, like I was saying earlier, to become fully conscious of itself. Okay? That is the goal, that's the imperative of that zeitgeist, is for us to create AI, for us to create the security state, for us to create an informed, empirical, rationalist society, state, a globalized state. So what I'm saying, though, is that that's just the beginning of this journey. We are just at the very precipice. The accomplishment of Freiheit, of individual rational agent freedom, is only the tip of the iceberg. And then as soon as we go down on that roller coaster, then we lose access to the abundance of energy. Then we get the stage of the Roman Empire where the empire can no longer come along and fix every bridge that breaks. And suddenly we're in the better times are in the rear view mirror. That's what the next 100,000 years are going to look like. We're not even going to be thinking about AI by then, okay? It's going to be so much more green. It's going to be the period of time in which the resources we have access to are immediately present towards us. And that is the same imperative as we've established for the past with the hunter-gatherers. That's exactly how this economy works. We only have the opportunity to extend ourselves as far as we do because we happen to have a lot of gas in our tank. We happen to have a lot of well-oiled hinges on these gates that we open, that these ghosts want us to open. That's the nature of the relationship between freedom and predestination, of these things that are outside of our control. Okay? So that's a pretty good synopsis on the nature of the past, the present, the future. So what do we think? Do we have any ideas? Because this is pretty, it can be lofty. I think I did get lofty again. Okay. You guys ask questions, but I do want to, be a little more clear. So, and it's funny because I was talking about this earlier, but I got sidetracked. So that paper that I wrote that was talking about this stuff, I went to one of the co-ops that they have in Cincinnati because I have a couple of friends there. And I told them, like, I have this really great project that I want to share with you guys because they happen to be, among the alternative agriculture types. So they were pretty into that stuff. So I took the paper to them and I was kind of reading through it. And I did exactly what I just did with you guys. Was I got way into like the lofty stuff. I was like, think 100,000 years from now, right? Okay. But it's just not practical. It's just not, we should do it with one hand, but not with both. Okay. I'm telling that to myself. So I finished talking about the paper and like the methodology of the paper, the fact that we should do like a big book club on this paper, because I really do. I have that conviction. I'm like, if we can sit and we can actually analyze this stuff or at least disprove it, if we can at least disprove this stuff, I can at least get it out of my head. I can just throw it in the fire, get it over with, say, okay, that was a good try. I have not had that happen yet. Okay. And saying we should do a big book club on it. We should apply this academic rigor. We should really try and poke holes in this thing. And the first thing that one of the other people said was like, well, so what do you want us to do? I was like, oh, well, and if you guys have been here for the whole stream, then you'll understand why I'm getting confused. Is because there's nothing for us to do, but there's also everything for us to do. So how the hell do you explain that? Without taking an hour to do it. So, that was my last live stream, was to explain, that point. What do we do? What do we really do? And I think I figured it out, okay? What we do is we use this Freiheit that we have in as much ability as it has to seek resources that are more immediate to us. That is an imperative. And I really, really fucking quizzed myself on this. I was like, what is this imperative that we can get? What is this one line of logic that each of us can follow and the system will play itself out? Okay? And it was that. If each of us use this freedom that we have, this little speck of freedom that we have, to deliberately choose to find resources that are more directly available to us, more closer to us, more immediate, that's the word that I use, more immediately close to us, and we use those resources, it'll work itself out. And I think that's a great place to start. I don't know if that's the end goal. I think that can change in a year because I wrote it just last year, so it's like whatever, like it can change. But I think it's a great starting point because that can cover some paradoxical stuff, and it can actually, what is that word? Like integrate the paradox, because it's like this. If I apply that line of logic where I'm using my freedom to find the closest things to me, the most immediate resources I have access to, that means that I can both participate in civilization. I can go to Kroger 10 minutes down the road and I can pick up like a can of beans, whatever, because it's 10 minutes away from me. But I can also say that I can garden to eat beans, right? So they're both very, very different, but they're both very, very close. And I think that tells me a lot about the zeitgeist that we happen to inhabit. I think that's a particular flavor of a paradox that we have never had to rectify before. We've never had to deal with such a paradox in our existence. Okay. I'm glad I cleared that up. Right? Okay. Melon says, when you say resources, is that limited to physical things? That is a really great question. Okay. For all intents and purposes, like whenever I'm talking about it in the paper, I'll just say this now. That paper that I'm talking about is called The Ghost and Its Struggle, and it's on my website, which is in my bio. You guys will click my bio, and then you'll see the website link. You'll click that link. You'll scroll down. You'll see a piece of paper with a bird on it. Okay, that's The Ghost and Its Struggle. It's just a PDF. You do not have to buy it. It's for free. You don't even have to download it. It's right there. It just pulls it up for you. Okay, that's all. Please, like, of your own volition, go check it out. Write something down that you don't like. Tell me about it. Let's talk about it. Okay. So for the sake of practical conversation, yes, when I talk about resources, I'm talking about physical things, because again, it's a freedom. It's the ego that we have, because our ego can only make choices about these physical things. All of the metaphysical stuff, that's like a whole, you're dipping your toes into an ocean that's a much different temperature, okay? It's a lot different than saying, I really crave Taco Bell. That's an economic decision, okay? It's less of it's not less, it's a different decision to make to devote yourself to something, okay? That's a metaphysical thing. But again, it's also a biological, it's an empiricist thing. So I can't really say. I want to say, I will stick to my guns. I will say that for the sake of our discussion, like practically, yes, it's physical. But there are metaphysical implications that your intuition can guide you through. And you should trust that. You should trust what your intuition says about it. Okay. Dean says, so in using more immediate resources, we are spending less time and energy reaching and in turn abstaining from the fight against nature that humanity loves to take part in. That gives us a lot of credit, but I see where you're coming from, and I can say yes. Yes, you are right, but I am going to put an asterisk on that. And I'm going to say that humanity never escaped from the jungle. The jungle transformed around us. The bugs that we have in our basement are species that are specifically inclined to live in caves. We live in caves. We live in really weird caves. We actually build these caves with labor and time and energy, but we live in caves. Does that, you know what I mean? So that's to say, so like, yes, you are right. And you are fully right, because we are choosing with as much freedom as we have to willingly refuse to partake in the exploitation of nature. However, that only tells me that nature is ready to take the reins to actually begin the stage of transformation next. Okay, so we have these caves around us now. Okay, these caves are going to transition into something very, very, very different. Okay? So like I was saying at the beginning, we have our conscious ability to choose an economic decision, like to build a house and to occupy a house and to pay tax, like land tax on a house. But we also have the environmental condition of these are the stipulations you must have for your house. It has to withstand my wind. It has to withstand my rain. It cannot be flooded or else you will die of a mold, whatever. Also, I am nature. I'm going to send rats to eat all of your grain. And then we say, like, I'm going to conquer you. And then nature's like, okay, I'm going to let you pretend that you're conquering me. And then when you least expect it, I'm going to, kind of snap back into an equilibrium. Right. That's my God. What did Requiem is that who? Yeah. Requiem said we are approaching the limits of language. Okay. I'll just leave it at that because he's absolutely right. Yeah. There's nothing else I could say about it. Right, like a pendulum. Yes, you are right, Dean. Yep, like a pendulum. Like a little bit like a thermometer, Like the mercury in the thermometer rises when it gets hot outside. We could say like, oh my God, like, look, it got so hot. Like, okay. If an alien saw a thermometer, it could say, whenever you make that bar go up, it gets really hot outside. And whenever you make that bar go down, it gets really cold outside. And then we would say, haha, silly alien, you're so stupid, because I can obviously tell that it's actually the environment causing the thermometer to change. Okay? Does that, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, up and down, left and right, non-dual, non-attached, non-action, so on and so forth. What feel free to throw out anything, guys, because what time is it? Oh yeah. I have nothing else really to talk about, I don't think. You guys know like Nick Land and like all the pneumogram stuff. Like I think that is so cool. I saw a video of somebody explaining it, and I was like, holy shit, like I've been sleeping on the cybernetics people this whole time. I was really impressed with how this guy explained it on YouTube. I thought that was really cool. He was explaining how, I'm not going to make this a tangent. This is its own live stream, and it's already 11 at night. Okay. Oh, excuse me. But he was saying that the pneumogram... Okay. We'll do one little thing on it, just because I think it's so cool. So, okay. The pneumogram is base 9, which means that all of the Sephirot add up to 9, right? So there's, like, if I was going to write down all of the numbers that add up to 9, I would say 1 and 8, 7 and 2, 5 and 4, 9 and 0, right? All of those add up to 9. All those pairs add up to 9. So they took those and they sketched them out. So the top one is 3 and 6. I want to use 7 and 2 as an example, though. So this Sephirot here is made of 2 circles. That's 7 and that's 2. And what they say, what they call these lines, they call these lines warps. And I was like, what the hell could you even be talking about? Calling them warps, like what is it trying to even convey? But what it's doing is it's saying, okay, so here's 2 and 7. Well, what's the difference? What's the in-between? What's the separatedness of 2 and of 7? It's like, well, okay, like 7 minus 2 is 5. Like, so what, though? Like, oh my God! The warp goes to the 5. The warp, guys, isn't this crazy? The warp goes to the 5. And then I was looking at it, okay, so there's 5 and 4 now, because we went from 7 and 2 to 5. The warp led us to 5. We walked into a warp. We walked between 7 and 2, and we got to 5. What the hell? So then 5 and 4, what's the difference between 5 and 4? It's 1. We walk between 5 and 4, and we land on 1. Bro, when I've heard Nick Land speak, and I was not impressed. He's not a strong speaker. which made sense when he said that they did not invent that pneumogram. Nick Land said it was given to them by a ghost. And when he said that, I shit in my pants. I could not believe it. Dude. And of course, you know, because like I'm listening to Nick Land talk and I'm like he's not explaining anything. He's not really saying anything, you know? And then so then the person who was interviewing him was like, oh, but what about, you know, the pneumogram? Like, it's such an interesting tool for like dissecting time and understanding the relationship between these archaic numbers. And Nick Land was like, oh yes, yeah. And we didn't come up with it. It was given to us. And I was like, what? Bro, I'm just saying. It's hard being right all the time. I'm just saying. Okay. What else? Was there anything else that I was gonna... I mean, we covered everything, guys. Do you guys have any ideas, any thoughts, any opinions? Do you guys like Nick Land? Do you know who he is? Who do we have? Rui, Requiem, and Dean. The goats. Hi, Rui. Okay. So, something else that's been on my mind is that I think it's really corny how the Yamnaya people are like boasted as this like super race of people. They were big and they were strong and they were autistic and they went and they conquered all of Europe. But then you see a picture of their carriage that they would ride around, and I kind of got the ick from it. I was like, you know what I mean? The carriage that they would ride around just had these big wooden wheels. There was something about that I was just like, really? Like, you guys are, you know, like, I just can't fit. I guess maybe that's because I'm American, so I think of like the pioneers riding around on carriages. But I can't imagine that being super intimidating, you know? I'm just like you guys were riding around with your horsies and you had like all your shell currencies in the back of your little wagon, you know? But I digress. That's something that's been on my mind. Well, no, this was great. Okay. We got someone named If It Makes You Pappy. What's up? I am just winding down. So I don't think I have anything else to say. If you guys have any thoughts or opinions, I'll hang out for a couple of minutes. But I think that pretty much does it. We covered the past, we covered the present, we covered the future. We covered the basic principles. We covered Nick Land and the pneumogram. We covered the Yamnaya. That's the making of a good live stream, in my humble opinion. This is one for the books, guys. Okay, I'll call it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I appreciate you very much. I just saw that Tyler joined. That was great timing. I was just about to sign off. I'm glad. Okay, now I've got a bunch of people joining. Okay, what's up, guys? I'm announcing that I'm signing off. So it was very good to see everybody. It was very good to have a chat with you. You guys asked great questions. I'm very glad that Requiem and Dean were both here because I was talking to you in Gabe's group chat. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. We'll be in touch. Okay. Peace, guys. Thank you. Bye.